Hello, I'm Susan Regan, host of Connecticut Valley Views, and my guest today is Marissa Gillett, and she is the chairman of the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority. She was nominated by Governor Ned Lamont to serve on the three-member board in April of 2019 and was confirmed by both the House of Representatives and State Senate in the 2019 session of the Connecticut General Assembly. So, Ms. Gillett, was this opportunity something you were seeking, or was it more like a recruitment by Governor Lamont?
More in the latter, although I have aspired to be a commissioner of a regulatory body for my whole career. But the governor reached out and recruited me from Maryland, where I had held a similar position on the staff side at their version of PURA. Every state has a regulatory body. And his administration had communicated that there was a lot of what's referred to as grid modernization work that Connecticut and New England needed to engage in. And that was a lot of my specialty in Maryland. So they presented me the offer, and I gladly accepted, and I've been here just about 5 years.
All right. Now, the move to Connecticut, did you feel that was so in other words, similar to Maryland, same challenges, same things, or did you find Connecticut a different situation?
Connecticut certainly has some unique challenges. I knew coming into the job that it was a state that had high prices for its utilities. So it's really quite a daunting task to come in and take over an agency where you know that the state needs so much more investment in its infrastructure, yet folks are already feeling the burden of the very high costs of your utilities in the state. So I wouldn't say that's a challenge unique to Connecticut, but it was a different landscape than what I was addressing in Maryland. And we also have a different regional dynamic here. The states in New England have, for the most part, similar goals in the environmental and energy space, and that's given us something to work toward. So there are some pros and cons of the energy landscape in New England versus the Mid-Atlantic, where I had previously worked.
Now, based on your current position, you also serve as one of Connecticut's representatives on the board of directors of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, Incorporated, and which is a cooperative effort apparently amongst 12 states. So please give us a brief overview of how that works.
Sure. So that's actually one of the connections that I had from my days in Maryland. The Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which is also sometimes referred to as RGGI, is a regional cap and trade program, and it's a cooperative effort by a number of states in the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast and New York, where we are collectively capping emissions from fossil fuel-fired plants in our region. And we do so by auctioning off allowances on a quarterly basis. An allowance is essentially a permit to emit 1 ton of carbon dioxide emissions. So the program acts to cap the number of emissions that you can have per year, and then the states receive the revenue from those allowances.
Oh, now with regard to, please go ahead.
The allowances and the revenue that come from that are reinvested by the states into projects for the benefit of its ratepayers. So things like energy efficiency and other energy types of projects.
Okay, now, is this something that any state can join? Are there requirements? Are the current members, do they review whoever they want to accept? How does that work if another state wants to add on?
Yeah, we've actually grown in the number of states that participate since I started back in 2010, 2011. We've had a number of states come into the program: New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Virginia. The core states that have been participating in RGGI include Connecticut, one of the founding members. And what we do is we're actually in the middle of a program review right now where the states get together, and there's a model rule that each of us, within our own state will adopt into statute or regulations And so during program review, we gather as a group of states and we review key program elements like the cap, some of the functionalities within there. We have a reliability mechanism, for example. And so if a state, any state wants to join RGGI, then they need to commit to adopting the model rule. And we certainly welcome any number of states that want to join. We've definitely seen some uptick in interest over the past couple of years. And I think it's a really great example of how the bipartisan group of states can come together and pursue similar goals.
With regard to the group that you have now, is there someone who is a leader for the group, or how often do you meet? Because when you start to talk about taxpayers and obviously electric ratepayers, the public is very interested to know where and how and who's actually giving the directives or objectives with regard to this RGGI group.
Oh, absolutely. So RGGI is great in that it works by consensus. So no state is obligated to do anything that state does not wish to do. We try to reach consensus on any major program design changes. We do have a board of directors, so an executive committee as well, where certain states take leadership roles, including Commissioner Katie Dykes from the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection has very ably been serving as the chair of the RGGI board for a number of years. But ultimately, it's up to each state as to whether they want to adopt any program changes or remain in RGGI.
Okay, we're just going to shift a little bit. Governor Lamont canceled just recently with regard to he held a press conference actually to talk about electric vehicles. And it happened at the same time that a legislative committee was expected to vote on whether the state should ban the sale of new gas-powered vehicles by 2035. Now, he put the lid down on that and said no. And obviously, part of the concern on the right was, can the grid really deal with it? How do you folks, how do you see it, and what are your concerns with regard to doing that?
Susan, that's a great question. It's it illustrates kind of what PURA's purview is. So when you think about adding demand to the grid, there are really two questions. There is the question of whether we have enough energy supply, and then there's the question of whether the infrastructure itself can withstand the addition of additional load. And PURA's purview is really over the latter question, so the infrastructure itself. And I'll say one thing that we have been really reflecting on and want to do a better job of is articulating to the public that there is a plan, and it's not just specific to electric vehicles, but we have an entire plan devoted to modernizing the electric grid, whether the additional load is going to come from electric vehicles or heat pumps or just simply more people using more electricity. You have to have a proactive plan for modernizing that infrastructure. And the good news is that we do. In fact, that's why the governor recruited me to this state, is to set forth a plan for modernizing the grid. And we did so in 2019. We have 11 tracks, and one of those tracks is dedicated to electric vehicles. And it led us to establishing a program that's been live since January 1st of 2022. And that program focuses on the siting and construction of the infrastructure necessary to charge electric vehicles. And it also has a rate design component, because one of the things that you want to make sure that happens is that folks are charging their vehicles at a time that is most optimal for the grid, because power ebbs and flows throughout the day. It costs different amounts during the day, and you really want to be careful on how you're bringing this additional load onto the grid. And PURA does have a plan. The utilities have been executing on this plan. So I think it's really incumbent on me and my staff and the utilities to do a better job sharing that plan with the public, because there most certainly is one.
Sure. Well, I know in the past that there have been complaints, there have been, I guess, concerns with regard to responding well enough to storms and so forth. So that means that if that were the case, that your vehicles that are there that are going out to respond or repair or whatever needs to be done, yours will also be electric as well, and they need to stay charged up. And then, of course, the taxpayers are saying, you know, can I dry my laundry now? Can I wash my laundry? Can I have my toaster oven on? Can I have my microwave on? My kids need to stay warm, whatever. So these things are serious concerns. And as you said, PURA has a plan. And I think that sharing that plan as you go along, which is important and key to let the taxpayers of Connecticut know and assure them that they are going to be allowed to use the various things that they have throughout the day, and be able to do it without concern to say you have to do it between 2 and 4 a.m. And that doesn't work for a lot of families. So it's going to be very interesting to watch that and how that develops, because we do believe, although this appears to be a temporary shutdown on this proposal, we probably will see it rise its head again.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, the Connecticut legislature has granted new powers and responsibilities to your office. So please, as much as you'd like to tell us about, give our viewers an update on the expansion of the authority by PURA.
Absolutely. And I think picking up on your last point, a concern that we've heard from ratepayers is that, you know, if we're going to branch into the utility provider being responsible for more of our daily life, you know, there's a trust issue, a credibility issue. And I think what the legislature was acting to do this past session and then a couple of years ago, following the tropical storm, is that they really acted to make sure that PURA, as the regulator, has the tools in our toolkit capable of regulating these utilities effectively, so that we can inspire confidence in us as ratepayers that these utilities are going to be held to account. So the Take Back Our Grid Act that was passed during a special session in the fall of 2020 following tropical storm really laid a good groundwork for expanding PURA's regulatory authority. And then the legislature acted this most recent session in 2023 to expand on that. And they did things like send us signals that we need to transition to something called performance-based regulation, which is where you reward the utility for good performance and penalize them for bad performance. It also empowered us to look really closely at the cost that they're passing to ratepayers. So utilities can no longer pass costs associated with like trade association dues, lobbying the legislature. They can't pass along costs associated with asking PURA for more money in a rate case. So a lot of things that folks really were like, wait a second, that's included in our rates that we're paying right now? And the answer was historically, yes. But the legislature took, I think, what was a really powerful first step forward in 2020, followed up by 2023, to empower PURA to hold these utilities to be more accountable and transparent in terms of what they are charging and recovering from ratepayers.
Now we're talking about here fiscal. Right now we have inflation. People are very conscious and aware of every cost, whether it's for medical coverage, food, electricity, and so forth. And you're talking about more responsibilities. We're talking about having to have electric vehicles, your trucks that are going out. There is concern then, did you have to add more people on to your staff? And if you added more people onto your staff, does that not also add to the cost as far as running this entire ship? And are ratepayers going to see high increases? I know there's always a confusion for ratepayers when it comes to what am I actually being charged for delivery, and what about for the actual product itself? So are we going to see higher prices? Are people going to be able to shop for the best buy? How is that going to work?
Sure. So a lot of really great questions and points there. So the first thing I would say is we recognize at PURA that one of the biggest frustrations is that folks don't understand how PURA works, and you don't understand how your utility bill comes out, don't understand how rates are set. So I've really spent the past better part of 5 years that I've been in this position working on demystifying PURA, and I really appreciate opportunities like this one where we can have conversations that are hopefully more accessible to members of the public. And one of the outcrops of those efforts was we actually directed the utilities to redesign their electric bills. And if you're a customer of Eversource, you may have seen that in your electric bill just this past month. So it's now reflecting the categories of costs that are actually on your bill and providing a little bit more information, where historically it used to just say supply versus delivery, which is really not accurate. In the delivery side of your bill, there were a lot of things in there, and they've always been there, and you just haven't had the insight into it. So we're acting on our side of the fence to start providing customers with more information about what you're paying for, and also more information about how to interact with PURA as we regulate these utilities. When it gets to the question of, with this added responsibility, does it require more staff for PURA? Does it require more staff for the utilities? I think the answer can be yes. PURA did receive an additional 10 staff from the legislature when they expanded our responsibilities. To put this in context, my head count is 90 people. Now, when you think about what I regulate, we regulate a fifth of the economy. So I'm not sure that 90 people is, I think when you understand that PURA as a regulator is stepping in where the free market does not exist, because these are monopolies, they're natural monopolies, the 90 people that we have that are standing between the utility charging whatever they want for their product and then charging what we have reviewed and allowed, I think is a really good investment by the state. The utilities, in terms of whether they require additional staff, that is something that we look at extensively in what are called rate case proceedings. And we've done a lot of analysis to understand how the utilities have been hiring or not hiring adequate staff over the past decade. There's a lot of concern over whether the utilities have been adequately recruiting line workers, for example, which are really critical. You know, we're talking about the folks who in blue sky conditions are replacing infrastructure and following storms are restoring power. These are really critical functions that the utilities have, perhaps been relying on contractors for to our detriment. So those are things that we look at extensively in the rate case as to whether the utility should be hiring more staff.
All right. Now, again, I'm going to stick on this kind of fiscal thing because I know this is top of mind for everyone. There has been, or I guess I'm aware of the fact that there's a period of time, if people are having a tough time, particularly through the winter and so forth, to be able to, I guess, hold off on paying until a certain time. They will not be charged late fees or whatever, and or is the option there to kind of, there's an understanding, there's estimated rates, and then there's actually an actual rate. Maybe define that a little bit. And then is there something where people can kind of even out their payments and kind of break it apart, so on a monthly basis they're paying a certain amount and then catch up when that period at the end of kind of free, no late fees are charged?
Yes, absolutely. So what you're hinting at or alluding to are a lot of things that we have been working over the past 5 years to really beef up in terms of what we consider affordability of electricity. And we started with electricity. We are transitioning into gas and water as well. But the electricity is where we started. And we have focused at PURA on defining what is affordable. And we looked around to our neighboring states and across the country. And the industry is really settling on this idea that you should be spending no more than 6% of your household income on electricity. And anything more than that is by definition unaffordable. And so we know that the first step in this is understanding the scope of the problem and how many people are impacted by that metric. And what we've determined is that there is an under enrollment in what are called financial hardship programs. So if you are a customer that lives at a certain percentage below the federal poverty guidelines, you are eligible by statute for what is called financial hardship status. That entitles you to things that you were alluding to, which include the winter protection moratorium. So if you are a financial hardship customer, you cannot have your service that you use for heat disconnected between November 1st and May 1st every year. That's by statute. Now, that doesn't mean that the money the bills that you accrue during that time don't have to be paid, but rather you have those 6 months to catch up. Also, we have created programs around budget billing, which allow folks to smooth out their bills across the year. We also have payment arrangements and arrearage forgiveness programs. So if you've, through no fault of your own, whether it's COVID or a loss of job or what have you, if you've racked up some arrearages, you can enter into these programs that we require the utilities to offer, where consistent payment towards your arrearage over a number of months will result in the forgiveness of commensurate balances. In addition to that, we have just launched what's called a low income discount rate. So if you are a financial hardship customer, then you may be entitled for a 10% discount on your electricity bill. And if you are 160% below the federal poverty guidelines, you can actually qualify for up to 50% discount on your electricity bill. So we're really trying to meet people where they're at and make electricity more affordable for all of our residents.
Just as of interest to me, how much contact do you have with the public? I mean, does the public contact your department on a regular basis about issues or problems or service or whatever? What part of your job is in response to these types of inquiries?
I would say that it's an increasingly large percentage of my job, and we are working to make it even higher. So PURA historically, and I don't think this is unique to Connecticut, I know it's not, having worked in Maryland at an agency, utility commissions are really challenging for people to understand. We're an executive branch agency, but we look and act and operate a lot like a court. And so we use terminology and legal terms that can be really intimidating to folks and really challenging to get involved with us. So over the past couple of years, we've put together what I like to call our PURA 101 Roadshow. I've done about 6 of them at this point. We also have a recorded version where we explain the basics about what PURA does, who and how we regulate, and also how to comment to PURA. At any given time, we might have between 80 and 100 active dockets open. So and a docket is what we use to refer to an individual proceeding, like a court case. So we certainly don't expect people to be able to follow even one of those dockets. But we're trying to break it down by issuing like quarterly newsletters that point out the dockets that we've just wrapped up, the dockets that will be active the next quarter, and the public comment opportunities. So we're trying to meet people where they are. And I think we've had some success in terms of increasing the amount of public comment that we have in our proceedings, but there is so much more room for improvement. And I think it's by participating in opportunities like the interview today where we can reach more people about how and why they should pay attention to what PURA does on a daily basis.
Let me just fall back a little bit to a question I kind of alluded to earlier, and that is the actual reading versus the estimated. A lot of times people look at their bill and they'll go, oh, I got 2 estimates, or no, I got an actual reading. why or how does that occur?
Sure. So, there are regulations in place that only allow the utilities to estimate a reading for so many months before they have to provide an actual reading. And the number of months differs, I believe, by type of utility, water, gas, electric. And it can happen. A common example might be that your meter is indoors and the utility cannot access it. That's usually the most common reason that people cannot get an actual reading on a monthly basis. But PURA does have a consumer call center, and if there are concerns that individuals have in terms of the number of estimated reads that they've received in a row, we certainly have staff available that can connect the customer to the utility and get to the bottom of why that may be continuing.
Sure. Well, I think, and we hope, that our show and our dialogue today has explained a few things to customers out there. Certainly public relations with PURA. It's very important with their customers because obviously these days, as I said, economic times are very challenging for them. And I think the more they know, the more comfortable they are and are open to contacting you. So we hope we've clarified some pertinent areas of interest by our taxpayers of Connecticut regarding PURA's current and future objectives in serving the needs of the public. And we follow this further. You can see, and correct me if I'm wrong, CTGov/PURA, and also electric rates are dropping. And see for that, see energizect.com to find their best buy and best route for them to go for their family. So I want to thank you today, Marissa, for your time, your candidness in responding to my questions, and hopefully we're going to have you on again in the future so we can catch up and see what progress is being made. For your viewers, please see your local PATV airing schedule, and you can always go to our website to ctvalleyviews.com to see all of our shows. So thank you again, Marissa, and certainly hope you have a great holiday.